The field of neuroscience is the study of the human brain, but many educators would be surprised to know that the field of education was not founded on neuroscience, but instead it was founded on the disciplines of business and psychology. And I think that there needs to be a paradigm shift from using those other disciplines and we start relying more on the tenets of neuroscience to inform our decision making and practices. For example, I hear a lot of teachers, they say things like, the students aren't retaining the information. I cover the material, I taught the information, but students just don't remember it. They don't retain it for long periods of time. They don't master it. And they say this because it shows that there's a lack of understanding of neuroscience and how the brain actually works. For example, the average human brain has between 80 and 100 billion neurons. A neuron is a cell, a nerve cell. And whenever we learn something new or we take in new information, the neurons start to fire off. And once they fire, they ignite the dendrite growth process. Dendrites grow from one neuron to the next. Now, dendrites act like cabling, so to speak. So if you had some cable and you looked up and you saw a telephone pole and the cable ran from one pole to the next, that's similar to how dendrites work in the human brain, because they connect one neuron to the other. And so once the dendrite starts to grow and connect, it creates certain pathways of information. Now, what starts the dendrite growth process is that students are, number one, exposed to new information. The neurons start to fire. And then the more students are exposed to the information, the more repetition that they have, the more that they can engage in that information, then dendrites will start to grow thick. And once dendrites start to grow thick, they start to grow and they have stronger connections to other neurons. And therefore, the information gets sent from one neuron to the next by way of the dendrites, by electrical currents that travel. And the thicker the dendrites grow and the stronger, the faster those electrical currents become. So that when you have this new information, it can pass from one neuron to the next, and therefore the information will be transferred from students' short-term memory to students' long-term memory. And once information goes into long-term memory, that means students have mastered it. They know it, okay? So when teachers say, I've covered the material, but students haven't mastered it, that's because they haven't give students enough practice with the material. They haven't engaged them long enough. You can't teach something one day and then teach something new the next, and then you jump to something else, and then you jump to something else, and you don't give students enough time to engage and practice the material. Because what happens is the dendrites may fire, but the information doesn't never transfer from short-term to long-term memory. Because what happens with dendrites is that if students don't practice it, they don't get a chance to engage in the material, dendrites may grow a little, but then they never connect to other neurons. And if they never connect to other neurons, then eventually they die. And if they die, then that means students haven't learned the information. And so what happens with short-term memory is that the information is there for a short period of time, but there's a purging process that happens with everybody's brain. Because if we didn't have this purging process, all the messages and information that we receive by way of our brain every second, we would become overwhelmed with information and we wouldn't be able to think and go about our daily lives. So this purging process happens where information goes to the short-term memory, and then if we don't use the information, or if our brains don't perceive the information as being applicable or necessary to our daily lives or interactions, the brain purges that information out and it's gone forever. So when teachers say, I taught the information or I covered it, but students haven't retained it, that's because that information was in short-term memory. And because they hadn't had extensive practice with that new information, it was eventually purged from the brain. And that's the brain's natural process. Okay, so if you're a teacher and you're trying to stop this from happening and you want your students to master the content, the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that when you're introducing information, that you're connecting the information to students' prior knowledge, something that they've already mastered. Because what you're doing is you're scaffolding the information, the new information on top of old information that they already mastered. Okay, so if you're introducing the new information, you're connecting it to prior knowledge, you get those neurons to fire, and the dendrites start connecting to that student's prior knowledge, which give them that reference point, and it will help to increase their understanding as you move forward into the teaching of content. The second thing you must do is you must make sure that you give students enough time to practice. Okay, you can't jump from one thing to the next. Students need time to practice the material, they need time to engage the material, and the more they practice, that helps the dendrites to grow. And the more they practice, the dendrites grow stronger and thicker, and then they're able to connect with other neurons, which allows those electrical currents to pass back and forth through the dendrites. All right, and therefore that information will stay cemented in their memory, their long-term memory. So after you've connected it to prior knowledge, you've allowed sufficient time for students to practice. The next thing you have to do, you have to deliver the information via more than one avenue. You can't stand in front of the class and lecture all the time, or just pass out worksheets, or just tell students just to read the chapter and answer the questions at the end. You have to engage the students in different ways. You can't have one primary mode of instruction. Okay, so one time you might have students work in groups. Another time they might work individually. Another time they might have to produce an essay. Another time they might have to give a presentation. Another time is this. Another time is that. Okay, so the totality of how you deliver the information and the different ways in which you deliver it, it makes more dendrites grow out of the same neuron that was originally sparked when you first introduced the information. And the more neurons that grow from that, the more dendrites that grow from that neuron, they're able to connect to other neurons, which creates different access and different pathways so that students can access the information. So if you're lecturing just to students all the time, there may be a few students that get it that way, but there may be a lot more that don't. So if you do presentations, there's some students that will get it via presentations but didn't get it during the lecture, but some students will get it from the lecture and the presentation. All right, and then there's the essay and so forth. So the different avenues will allow different pathways of information, which allow students to access it, which they'll be able to move it from short-term to long-term memory. Okay, this is all tenets of neuroscience that I'm regurgitating to you. Okay, so for example, I'm gonna give you one small example of what I'm talking about. Say if I were to teach you about something as simple as an apple, okay? If you had no knowledge of what an apple is, and this is the first time you're hearing about it, and I showed you an apple, okay, a red, delicious apple. You will look at that apple and I will talk about it and I might tell you about it and say it's a fruit. Okay, so number one, I'm connecting it to your prior knowledge. You may have had other access and information about other fruits. So if you know about a banana, if you know about a cherry, if you know about grapes, whatever fruit that you have been exposed to previously, dendrites will grow and connect with neurons and make pathways to the other information that you've learned. Okay, and then you might see it and you might say, okay, well, this is a red apple. All right, and then it connects to the information that you know about colors. And then I might tell you and show you pictures of other apples that are green, that are yellow. All right, so that you might see apples can come in different colors. So it's connecting to the other information. All right, dendrites are growing, it's becoming thicker. But here's the kicker. If I was just to tell you about it, don't allow you to touch the apple, don't allow you to engage it in other ways, your information is going to be limited. All right, and for some students, the dendrites in their brain, they will not grow strong, they will not go thick, and they will only connect to those other neurons from the prior knowledge that they've already been exposed to. Okay, but what if I was teaching you about an apple and I told you about it, showed you some pictures, but then I also allowed you to take a knife and cut the apple open. so you can look at the inside. You can inspect the seeds. And then I also allowed you to take a slice and I allowed you to taste it. Okay? And then we would take these apples and then we would make apple pies. And then we would make apple juice. Okay? And then we would use these apples in other ways, and we make cookies and other things of that nature. So all of this different engagement, the different processes, it would allow you to have developed a deeper understanding about the topic, which is an apple. So teachers can take that same process and apply it to whatever content you're teaching, whether it's English, science, social studies, whatever the content is. You have to connect the information to students' prior knowledge, give students enough time to practice, and also allow more avenues of teaching and delivering the content. You can't just rely on one method and one source of delivering the information to students.